if you find yourself finding something that you want to know more about or that you feel drawn to, like keep pulling at that thread, because every conversation you have will lead you to a new place. Every course you take, every new person you meet is leading you as you pull that thread, and you never know what you're going to find there.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found, the podcast about the real, messy, unexpected journeys that lead us to the work we love. I'm Monica Argandonia, and every week I talk with someone whose story proves there's no single right way to build a meaningful life. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Path Found. Today's conversation is one of the most honest and layered stories I've had the privilege of sharing on this show. My guest, Londa Jensen, has followed curiosity across countries, careers, and identities, often without a safety net and never with a 5-year plan. This episode is for anyone who has ever felt lost, behind, ashamed, or unsure, and kept going anyway. Here's my conversation with Londa Jensen. So, welcome today, and I'm super excited to have you on the show. I always begin with, what were you like in high school?
In high school, I was weird. I didn't fit in a traditional box. So I was like president of the National Honor Society, and, I was in DECA, the marketing club. I was also in ROTC. So once a week I had to wear that green uniform. And I was just always marching to the beat of my own drum. Whatever I found to be interesting, I pursued. And what happened is that when I was in high school, we had the internet finally, and they had this thing called Streetwise, which was this way for you to promote bands. And so when I was in high school, I started promoting rock bands. And so what they would do is they would send me this big box of swag, which was just stickers and demo tapes and all this stuff. And so, I would go around and spread the stickers around and the tapes and the CDs or whatever. And as I was doing that, they would give me free tickets to shows. And then I was so involved that throughout high school, especially the last 2 years of high school, I basically had backstage passes to every major rock show that came to Denver. And my mom was very, very open-minded about it. I will say that, sometimes she would go to shows with me and other times she didn't. But, the amount of times I spent on tour buses with bands and things. And I think the thing that I'll say about it is that if I look back on that now and I had a 16-year-old, I'd be like, no way on earth would I actually do that. But I had such positive experiences. The band members that we interacted were always so kind and so respectful for us being as young as we were, which looking back, I'm shocked by, but they were very, very kind to us. So yeah, I got super into this space and I thought I want to work in the music industry. And so at the time when I was applying to college, I was a first generation college student. So I didn't really even know what degree do you get to be in the music industry? It didn't really make much sense. But I did have this one woman in particular. She was my high school career counselor. She actually came on one of my trips with me last year, but she was such an important person in my life because she's the one who helped me fill out the FAFSA. I remember the first time I went to her office, I told her I wanted to job shadow Uncle Nasty, who was the radio DJ for the rock station in Denver. And she was like, okay. And she drove me there. She went to the job shadow with me. She stopped and got me Krispy Kreme donuts on the way. It was a core memory for me. She helped me apply to colleges. She helped me figure out where would I want to go to college. She helped me fill out scholarship applications. She was just a really, really important person in my life at that time. And so I decided that I would study business, which would I go back and change that? Perhaps, but I studied business administration and I ended up receiving a full ride scholarship to USC, which was incredible. I was on their topping scholarship, which is for first generation students. And so that's kind of what happened. That's how I got to that was my first leg of the journey. And then it changed so much from that point because once I got to USC, first of all, I had no idea what I was doing. There was just so much. It's such a huge university. There were just so many things going on. I was very lucky because that scholarship offered a lot of support for first generation students, which I think helped me be successful at school. But I realized I hated business because I had no idea there would be so much math. I did not sign up for that in my head. But while I was going through my business program, I had lots of different jobs on campus. So I worked at the the alternative spring break trip in the volunteer center. And then when I was living in Los Angeles, I met all of these Arab people. I went to a hookah bar for the first time. I met all these Arabs. I am from a small community in Loveland called Loveland, Colorado. And we did not have a lot of diversity there. So like this experience was like so new and so different. And I was just like, wow, this is so interesting. So I started going back there. And before I knew it, all the friends that I had in Los Angeles were Arabs and they all knew other Arabs. So everyone I knew was from the Middle East and spoke Arabic. And I hated not knowing what they were talking about. I got a private tutor and I started learning Arabic. And, you know, when you learn Arabic in a traditional setting, they teach you something called Fusha, which is more classical Arabic. So when you speak, you sound like a newscaster or like a Shakespearean actor. So it's not really the vibe. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. Like they would always give me a hard time about it. And so I was like, I have to go somewhere where I can learn this. And so I'd never really left the country before. And I was originally supposed to go to the AUB in Lebanon, but they had shut the program down. So I ended up studying at the American University in Cairo. And I had never left the US. I had no contacts. I signed up for a year. And I got there and it just changed my entire life. Like I was just so curious. I think that's something I've always had, is just this like natural curiosity for things. But I got there, I used to keep this little notepad where I'd write all my weird questions and what does this word mean? And do they have this kind of milk? And like, what does this mean? And I had this one Egyptian guy who was friends with my roommate, and he would come over once a week and answer all of my ridiculous questions. So while I was there, I was just like eating this up. Like I just like seeing a completely different way of being. It just changed me in so many ways. And so I spent a year there. I ended up getting a minor in Arabic and Middle East studies so that I could justify being gone for that long. And when I came back, I was just devastated. Like there was like, I was like, I can't, like, I don't want to be here anymore. I have to go back out there. And so to hold me over, they gave me a job in the study abroad office. And so I worked in the study abroad office. And then once my, degree was over, I was like, I'm going to find a job like in international education or doing something like this. And so when I finished, my very first job actually was for a company called Relief International, a nonprofit based in LA. And they hired me to run this youth leadership exchange program. And they were going to bring Iraqi kids, high school kids from Iraq to the US. Now, I have my own political feelings about this process, but at the time, this was a very big opportunity for me. So they put me in charge of bringing 50 Iraqi kids to the US that were in high school. And what an experience. I was like not old enough to do this. Like I think really I was too young to probably do this, but they gave me the full opportunity. I was supposed to take them halftime to Washington, D.C. and halftime to Los Angeles. And I learned so many things. Like I think what I found to be most interesting is just like those subtleties of intercultural relationships, like the things that you do that upsets someone that you have no idea why it would upset them, or just those like differences that pop up that are just not clear. They're kind of like that iceberg part that's under the water, right? And so I had that experience and I was like, wow, that was very interesting. I definitely probably shouldn't have been given this job, but I did it successfully and all those kids went home. And there was this experience though that we had on that trip where they met with the State Department. And some of the messaging of that experience I found to be quite upsetting. Like the kids are asking, like, what do you know about our country? And it was like, we know how many schools you have and how much electricity you use. And I just found that like so disheartening, post-war. And so
what year is this?
This is 2007.
Okay.
So in 2007, I had that initial experience and I was like, wow, this is really a powerful experience. And then I was kind of, flipping about. Like I took a job where I helped bring students mostly from China to the US. So like kind of the opposite direction, normal study abroad, right? From sending students from here outside. This one was more about bringing students from outside inside. And they were also high schools. So they were placed with like host families and things like that. And so I did that for a while. And then I was like, okay, I want to teach English abroad. So I started looking for teaching English certification programs. And I found one in Thailand and I was like set to go. And then anti-government protesters seized the Bangkok airport. And so I wasn't able to go. And so I rerouted back to Egypt, which had my heart from the time that I had spent there. So I got my full certification there. And then while I was there, I found a job to teach in Iraq. And I was like, this is my opportunity to be able to see what those kids meant when they said, what do you know about the place we live live in. And so much against everyone's better judgment, everyone has so many strong opinions about this. In 2000, was it 2008? I believe it's 2008 or 2009. I picked up my life and I moved to northern Iraq, so the Kurdish region of Iraq. And I lived in a place called Erbil to start. And it was very different than Egypt. I'll just say that.
How old are you?
I was maybe 20. I'm 40 now. So let's see, 25 maybe?
Okay, so just to go back a little bit, you grew up in Colorado, kind of a smaller area. You go to USC, you land into business. You're not, music's on the side now, it's gone.
Yeah, music is like God. I go to Egypt once and it's over.
Okay. And then you go to Egypt junior year, was it?
Yeah.
Junior year. Okay, so you're like 20-ish?
Yeah.
You go for the whole year, changes your life. You come home, finish your degree, so you stayed in LA.
Yeah, I stayed in LA and I had a couple different jobs. One was in the Relief International was in LA, and then the other one with the students from China, that one was like in Rowland Heights. So it was like the suburbs of LA.
Yeah, okay. This is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, good for you. I mean, it seems like every opportunity that just appeared, you took it. Like you're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's try this. I mean,
I did.
But fearless.
Yes, I would say it was very fearless. That's a really polite way of putting it at the time. But yes, I was fearless. So I took this job and I wasn't even sure if I was going to like it. Like, let me be frank. I was like, I don't even know if I like children, but I was like, I'll give it a try. And so they placed me with middle schoolers to start. And I think I cried every day. It was so hard. And, because in my mind, I'm like, I want to be like, treat you like an adult. I give you respect, you give me respect, like just very like casual. But culturally, that's not really the style of the relationship between teacher and student. It's more intense. It's more authoritarian, I would say. And so, the other teachers, like my boss and stuff, would be like, you need to be more aggressive. And I just could not do that. But then one day I tried it, I've got all these kids who like won't listen, won't pay attention. And then finally I start to be like what I would describe as mean, and then all of a sudden they're writing me letters like, we love you, Miss Jensen. And I'm just like, this is so bizarre. So maybe like a couple months into that experience, there was like a weird experience that happened there that I would probably not share about, but the head of the school decided to move me and my friend from Erbil to a totally different city. So they moved us from Erbil to Suleimani, and we were the first teachers there. Like the program in Erbil was pretty well established, but this one was like a brand new school. We were going to be the only American teachers there. And we said yes. And we did it. And it was weird, but I had younger students. So I taught second and third graders math and English. And teaching math to students whose first language is not English is quite a feat because you teach it in English. But I was in love with those students, like just in love. And I enjoyed teaching there so much. And so I stayed like an extra 3 or 4 months after my original year contract ended. And while I was there, I had this wonderful opportunity to meet some of the families of the Iraqi kids who I had brought to the US several years earlier. And like their families were like, you took care of our children when they were in your country. And now that you're here, we're going to take care of you. So they would like take me to, they were like very big on barbecuing. So we did a lot of barbecues. They would, dress me up in the traditional Kurdish style dress. Like they were just so wonderful. So after that, while I was in Iraq, I was just like, realizing that if I really wanted a good job in international education, that I would need a master's degree. Like I just kept seeing it over and over again when I was applying for jobs. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I had found a program that I was very excited about. It was an interdisciplinary program in intercultural relations through Lesley University. And I applied and I got in. And now I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm the first person in my family to go to college, but now I'm going to get my master's degree. This is crazy. Looking back on that experience, I feel like, those student loans were, I missed that learning opportunity when I went on the full ride scholarship. But I got that lesson on the master's degree program because those student loans felt so heavy after, having all this time after graduating undergrad and not feeling like I had to do things because of that. I was able to do lots of things. And so getting the master's degree, I was excited to do it. I thought it would really open up more doors for me. So I went and I did it and I loved it. Like I thought that program was amazing. We learned everything from like neuroscience to intercultural communication to like how is identity formed. It was really a cool program. And while I was there, I got this job kind of in the middle of my program. And so I had to take a leave of absence, but I got hired to be the BRIC coordinator for Babson. Babson has this program for undergrads that is to visit the BRIC countries. So they don't visit Brazil, but they did visit Russia, India, and China. And it was about 6 months or one semester. And so they hired me to run this program. And so I took 20-year-olds to Russia, China, and India for a semester. And it was unhinged. It was completely crazy because I'm still very young at this point. I think maybe at this point I'm like 26, 27. I'm not much older than these students that I'm taking. So we went to Russia, we went to Moscow, we went to St. Petersburg, we went to Beijing, Shanghai, and then we went to Delhi.
Did you have any training? Like, did they prep you at all for, like, how did you do this?
No, they didn't really. I've always been kind of like I have a project management energy. So like I can plan a trip, I can organize things. And obviously I've been in my master's program taking these courses about like international education and things like that. So I have like some frame of reference. Mostly I have a frame of reference of like bringing these Iraqi kids and like the lessons I learned from that. But no, there's not really a lot of training in like how do you deal with students? Like how do you deal with when they're drinking too much or they're, rude or disrespectful? And so it was really quite an opportunity for me to figure out what kind of leader, I was going to be in these environments. And I made some good choices and I made some bad choices, and we made it through this experience. The thing is that university professors would meet us in each location, but that those professors didn't follow them the whole time, and the professors weren't the ones who were like, did you get to class on time? Are you drinking too heavily? Have you had an emergency in the middle of the night, right? The professor's just teaching the class. So I was grateful to have the professors because at least I had like some adult to talk to as things are progressing. But I did that program, and as hard as it was, because also I did that program right after my mom passed away. And so to be gone and like completely isolated from all my social networks was pretty difficult. But it was also nice to just be like on the way, like dealing with stuff that wasn't my own stuff to deal with. And so I really, really enjoyed it at the end of the day. And when I came back, I finished my master's program and then I got a job at MIT. So I was working in their Center for Development and Entrepreneurship. And I really loved that. Like most of the people who were in that program, they had like received some sort of scholarship and they were all from other countries and they had business ideas to go back and implement in their home countries. And so I was like reading a lot of business plans and, program managing for like the experiences that they'd have on campus. And I loved it, except that my boss, I did not love. He was not what I would pick as a person to be like my mentor and person who supports you in your career growth. He was pretty impatient. He was pretty rude. And, my mom taught me when I was young, like, if you aren't happy doing something, then you don't do it. She was just like, you shouldn't stay in a job that's terrible. Like, what would be the reason for that? She's like, you spend so many hours at your job, like you should at least like it. And so with a heavy heart, I quit that job and I moved home to Colorado with my dad. And man, did I feel like I had failed. I felt like, man, I did all these things and now I'm back in the place where I grew up where, everybody basically got pregnant and stayed. And now I'm back and I'm just like, like feeling a bit of failureness. But I used it as an opportunity to regroup and I started looking for jobs again. And I found like my dream job. And the universe felt like it had aligned in some crazy way because it was at the University of Texas at Tyler, which I, in my mind, would have never heard of or cared about or probably wanted to go to. But my career counselor from high school, when she was no longer a career counselor, she ended up working there.
Oh.
So I had this connection, like I knew about it. I knew she had worked there. And then when I called her and told her about the role, she said, oh my God, that's the role that my best friend when I lived there had, and she's moving on.
See, you never know when that network, when those people come back. Like,
yes. I mean, it was crazy.
It is, yeah.
She was like, oh, Paul, the guy who's hiring. Yeah, I know Paul. And I was just like, this is crazy. So she called her people and put in a good word. And I got that job sight unseen, like never been to Tyler, Texas in my life. And I agreed to go to Tyler, Texas.
Where's Tyler?
It's between Dallas and the border of Louisiana. And they consider it behind the pine curtain. And it is quite a conservative place. So I moved there, and I remember when I got there, one of the students interviewed me for the newspaper and described me as eccentric. And I was just like, oh boy. Like, that's not what I was like expecting. I was hoping I'd be like much older, have more cats before someone described me that way. But I got this job running their GATE program, which was a global awareness through education program. And it was the coolest program ever. They had to create it because they needed something like it for their, I don't know, their licensing or, the things that universities have to do to keep their standing. And so they created this program that is essentially a 2-year program. So the students would come in as freshmen, and then the summer between their sophomore and junior year, the university would pay for them to go abroad for 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm obsessed with this idea because, one of the challenges with study abroad programs is that there's not a lot of training before you send them out. So like the experience that they have there could be anything. Like they could get a lot out of it, or they could just go there and party and hang out with other kids from the US, so there's not a lot of opportunity for you to like give them this training and invest in them in this way. So I loved this program. So through my program, I, taught intercultural communication and intercultural relations to them for these 2 years leading up. I had guest speakers from the places come and talk to them. And then we had like events on campus that I would host. Like it was amazing. Like I love this job so much. Like I, hosted volunteer opportunities and, cultural events on campus. And then I got to teach these students, and then I got to take them abroad for 6 weeks. Like this was a dream. Okay. It was a challenging place because for a university that had decided to do intercultural relations, like it was a place that clearly needed it because I faced so many weird things while I was working there, like I had a friend of mine, his partner had passed away, fell off the roof of a building and died. And because they weren't allowed to be married, he had no rights when he passed away. And it was like a very sort of traumatic experience. And he made this movie about it. So he came to campus to speak. And when he came to speak, we had like prayer warriors and, we had students who were kind of aggressive and like followed us to dinner afterwards. I had to file like a Title IX violation. Like it was just kind of hard, but I also knew that it was really important because it's one thing to like preach to the choir, but it's something else entirely to be able to work with people who believe something different than you. And my philosophy through all of that was like, I'm not going to teach you what to believe, but I'm going to teach you to question why do you believe what you believe? Because I really just wanted them to have like strong critical thinking skills. So this job was my dream job. And if I could have stayed there forever, I would have. However, the university decided to close the program. They got their accreditation, and they didn't want to spend the resources on it anymore. And that's where things got weird and very dark. So when that was starting to happen, I got a phone call from a guy that I had worked with when I was in college. And at the time, he owned a test prep company. So he helped students prepare for SATs, LSATs, things like that. And he was like, meet with me in LA. I have a business. I really want your help. So I came to meet with him, and he was like, basically, it's cannabis. And he was like, cannabis is legal now. We have what do they call it? It was like a medical collective, and we have all the paperwork. And, I trusted this person, and this was so outside my wheelhouse. But then he also like flashed a number in front of my eyes that I could like barely comprehend. I'm thinking about the student loans in the back of my head. And I agreed. And man, did I learn some big lessons from that experience, because number one, I think it's very easy to take a job for financial reasons. It's very easy to look at that number and think like, wow, that's going to help me. I'm going to be able to buy a house, or I'm going to be able to pay off my student loans, or I'm going to be able to do whatever. But the question is, are you going to feel good about yourself doing it? And I discovered that I did not feel good about myself doing it. And while I wasn't doing anything particularly egregious, I was the operations manager. So I facilitated like tracking money and payments and ordering supplies and HR. Like it was like a normal job from my perspective and the way that I ran it, right? But one of the locations that we had, SWAT officers cut the gate, kicked the door in, and I was there with the grower, and he was just showing me like how things were going. We were having one problem in this room, or in the back room, we hear a sound, but it could be like our water pump. Well, anyway, 13 SWAT guys come in with guns and are like, get on your knees. And I'm just like, oh my God, like I've spent my entire life being a teacher. Like, this is insane, And they're asking me questions like, are you a gang member? Where are all the drugs? Where are all the weapons? Where's all the money? And I'm just like I can't even wrap my mind around it, because I'm just like, I'm running a business. So I got arrested and I was charged with 3 felonies: distribution, cultivation, and sales. And the irony, though, is that I think it was Prop 64. I can't remember which prop it was, but one of those props dropped all of those misdemeanor charges. And that had happened before I was arrested, but they hadn't updated it in their system yet. So it went onto my record as 3 felony charges. So I got out on bail, or they freed me on my own recognizance or whatever. And I had never felt worse in my life. Like, I felt like I had hit the bottom of like everything. I didn't even know I could feel this bad, And I felt so much shame and, just disappointed in myself. So there was like a period of probably 6 months where I had to continue working there because I wasn't going to be able to find another job while I have 3 felonies pending. So I waited until my case was cleared. They ended up, after a lot of money, dropping them to a misdemeanor charge of operating without a business license.
Okay.
And so at that time, I had recently was like about to get married, and my partner is not from the US. And so we were about to have to go through immigration, and I was going to have to be the financially responsible party. And so I'm just like, oh my God, everything's going to be fine. So I started applying for jobs, and I was like, I will literally, at this point in my life, I was like, I will do anything I needed to pay this bare minimum number of money so that I can be this person on paper for my husband. And so I probably applied to, I don't know, maybe 200 jobs. And I found this job that I don't think at any other time in my life may have piqued my interest, but because I had hit such a low point in my life and I was starting to like try to, I've like made my first vision board, and I was just like, how do I change the place that I'm in? Because I don't know how else to get out of this. So I'll try anything. So I read this book called You Are a Badass, and I made my first vision board. And I remember the first thing on my vision board was, you are not a criminal. And I found this job at Manifestation Babe, and it was like, assistant, Jill of all trades. And I was like, I can do that. So I applied for the job. And, when I had the interview, one of the things that they had asked me to do in the interview was to plan a retreat to Bali. And I was like, well, I could do this in my sleep. Yeah. So I did that and I got the job. And, when I started there, the pay was a third of what I was making in cannabis. But I was like, I'll work hard. Like, this won't be forever. And now it's 8 years later, and I'm the CEO of that business. So I started as like the admin. And when I started, they were small. It was just like the founder and her husband. And then we grew and we grew and we grew. And I just did operation stuff, like the hiring, I did legal, I did tech backend stuff. I built the funnels, I built the website, made all the things connect. Like, I'm just like learning as I go. I don't know anything about this when I enter, but I'm like very resourceful. I'll figure it out. Turns out I love this because I'm watching the impact that she's having on her community because she's teaching them personal development, right? And I answer all the emails. So I'm seeing these women being like, this is changing my life. This is changing my life. And that felt so, so good, to see the impact that I was working somewhere where I was having an impact, especially after cannabis, where, I'm getting like death threats on this side. And over here, I'm reading like beautiful emails about how wonderful this is and how much it's changed my life. And I feel great. Okay.
What's the time span here between
cannabis and that?
Yeah.
Cannabis, I got arrested in 2017 and I started working at Manifestation Babe in February of 2018.
Okay. All right.
And so probably within a year and a half, they changed my title to COO. And then I grew a team of like 15 people. And then recently the owner has wanted to step back a bit. She had a baby, she wants to just sort of focus more on home life. She's pregnant with another baby. So they asked me to step in and be the CEO. So I have been doing that. It's been really hard. And while this entire story isn't complete, like this chapter, I think that it may be nearing completion because while I've been at Manifestation Babe, I started my own business. And so I started a business called Manifested Adventures, and I basically create transformational travel experiences for women. And I took everything I know about international education, intercultural relations, identity, neuroscience, and I put them into these travel experiences because, I believe that all these women who are wanting wanting to change their lives, they want to step into someone new or whatever, that pattern disrupt is very powerful. And travel is known to help rewire the neural pathways in your brain. And so I essentially married these two things that I really love, which is personal development and international education and travel. And so I take groups of women, usually about 12. So far, I have trips to Bali. I have 2 different trips to Egypt. And now I'm building a course on the behavioral science behind identity shift. And all of that information has come from just like my time and being in my master's degree, but also in the personal development space and seeing like some of the places where that has fallen flat. And so it's like kind of interesting because I don't know how much longer I'll be at Manifestation Babe, because now I have this new thing that I've created that I really want to give my heart to. So I don't know when that chapter will end and this chapter will like officially be fully open in that way. But I think it's just one of those things where life takes you, it just takes you. And if you say yes, if you asked me 10 years ago if I would be doing this, I would have never imagined.
Really, even 10 years ago. I mean, you were doing travel.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I always believed, like in all these roles that I had, I was always an operations person. I was like, I know how to execute. I can get anything done. And I always felt like I'm not a visionary. Like I'm not a big ideas person. I'm the person who will take your big idea and execute it, right? And so I had to like work through that belief because it turns out I can also be an entrepreneur. But I think I had a lot of self-doubt there because I had spent so much time helping other people with their businesses that I felt like I wasn't the type of person who could own my own business.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit because,
Sure.
I think a lot of people when they start out thinking about jobs, if they're in college or whatever they're doing, we only know the jobs that we're exposed to. And, you really took your interests and your passions and like your curiosity and found these incredible jobs. Nobody thinks about those as careers. Like, I'm going to go be this study abroad, person that's going to go lead these trips and whatever they might be. And so I think, that lesson there is that, right? I mean, it was your curiosity. So
Just like opening those doors. Like,
Right.
and I'm interested in this, and then digging into that and then seeing what's there. And then if you are interested in something completely different, that's okay too.
Right. But then, doors were shut. You had to go back home, having those feelings of now what? Like I'm starting all over again. And, where do I go from here? Did you always just want to keep going? Is it a lot of people would have just said, oh, I might just have to get a regular old job, or I might have to. I mean, you just kept finding these really unique opportunities. Is it because that's what you were looking for, or do you think you were just open to those?
I think that I was just curious because once I would be like, okay, I studied abroad, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this. They let me work in the study abroad office. Well, now I'm like, this is a job. Like,
Right.
this is a job I could have. Well, now I'm like digging into that. And then as I'm doing that, I'm like, oh, look at all these other jobs that exist in this space that I never knew or ever heard of in my life. And then as you're meeting people along the way, you find out some job that they have that's really interesting. Like, it's really just about digging into and exploring all of those things, because when I was graduating high school, I didn't know anything about the world, let alone those jobs that existed out there. And I think as I had experiences and was like, I really loved this part and I didn't love this part, it helped me be more discerning, and I think that's one of the biggest gifts that came from the cannabis space was as I was stepping into looking for something new, I sat with myself and I said, what do you want? And I honestly didn't know, but what I started with was a list of things I 100% did not want, and I turned them into positives. So it was like, I don't want to feel bad. Okay, well, I want to feel appreciated. I don't want to feel like I have trapped in a job. I want to have the freedom and autonomy to work from home or set my own schedule. Like, that job just gave me a lot of things I absolutely did not like and helped me get clear on what I did like. And the thing about Manifestation Babe is like, I wasn't like, yeah, this is the job, right? But I had gotten really clear about what I wanted to feel like in that job. I want to feel appreciated. I want to have flexibility. I want to be able to have autonomy and make my own decisions. I don't want to be micromanaged. I want to like be lit up by what I'm doing. I want to be able to sleep because I feel good about myself. myself at night. And Manifestation Babe ended up being that. And I think because of that clarity, I think that's why I ended up staying at Manifestation Babe as long as I did, is because it checked all those boxes for me. But if it hadn't, I think it would have led me into being like, okay, this part I didn't love. Like, how can I find something else that might hit that spot for me?
So why start your own business?
I didn't really necessarily plan on it, but I have obviously been going to Egypt now for like 20 years. And so when people I know want to go to Egypt, they come to me and they'll be like, Londa, I want to go to Egypt, but I don't think I can go by myself. Like, the only person I'll go with is you. So what I was doing was planning trips for friends and then paying to go to Egypt repeatedly. And I was like, this is very unsustainable. And so it started like, I was like, I'm just going to take people, I'm going to like take people to the Middle East. That was like women to the Middle East was kind of how it started. And then it, my bosses at Manifestation Babe, when I asked them, I asked for their, blessing, because obviously I work full time for them. And they were like, yeah, we love this idea for you. And then they were like, we want to invest in your business. And so that gave me like a little extra belief in myself. Well, then maybe about 6 or 7 months later, because she was also going to be stepping back from Manifestation Babe, she was like, I can't do this with you. Like, my heart's not in it. Oh man. And then everything kind of came to the surface. All of those beliefs about like, am I good enough? Am I capable enough? Can I do it without them? But I think truly when they said they would invest in me, it gave me just enough belief in myself that I took the leap. And then when I watched the impact of that experience on the women that I took on the first trip, I couldn't turn back.
That's awesome. That's pretty incredible. So how do you advertise? Like, how do these women find you? And
a lot of women, I've done 6 trips. So I've done 4 trips to Egypt and 2 trips to Bali. My Bali trip is coming up in 2026. That trip filled. It actually sold out in 12 days. That was like my first moment of being like, okay, I can do this, And I just launched the 2 2026 trips to Egypt. I am a one-woman show. So I have to like build the website, plan the trips, sell the trips, write the emails, make the social. And so it's a little bit hard. I'm very lucky because a lot of women in the first place came through Manifestation Babe. But now I have like, I would say on an average trip, 50% of women are returned. They're coming back. And I have someone who've done every trip I have.
Oh, wow.
So I'm like waiting to hit that point of like sort of the domino effect where there's enough people who have gone that the word of mouth really helps to fill the trips. But I think part of why I'm in that limbo of like, will I stay or will I completely focus on my own business is because it's getting to a place where it's like, if I have to create social content and scale this, I'm going to have to be able to give it my full attention.
Would you go anywhere else? Is it Bali, Egypt? Are you looking?
Yeah, the answer is yes. It's just like one of those balances where, I learned this lesson. I offered 2 other trips and I wasn't able to fill them. And so it's like, you got to build the consistency for the trips that people really want. And then, once you have a good number of people and those are easier to fill, then it's easier to add a new trip. So I would like to add Peru. I'd like to add Turkey. I have a long list of places I would like to add. So it's just, I'm growing it and scaling it as quickly as I can. But, again, running a full-time business and your own business, it doesn't get the amount of time that I would like to be able to give it.
So looking back, would you have done anything different?
I don't think so. Sometimes I say like I wouldn't have gotten my master's degree because it was so expensive, but that's not true because I really loved learning and I really loved everything I got there. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have ended up in these places that I had ended up that like ultimately led to where I am now. And I think about that a lot with the cannabis because obviously it's very easy to be like, wow, I would go back and never do that. That was such a bad choice. But gave me a lot of clarity on what I actually wanted. It definitely taught me a lesson about money. Like there are some things that are not worth your soul. And it was the thing that led me into where I am today. Like, would I have taken this job in any other context? Probably not.
Or started your own business.
Exactly.
So where do you see yourself expanding, making your business bigger?
Yeah. I also think about other things I could do. Like, obviously, I'm very good at setting up systems and helping people build businesses. So that's certainly something I'm open to exploring. I also have like a weird side passion, which is like, and I don't even know what this is, something I just do as a hobby. But, I find a lot of people who struggle with like the system, whether that's getting a divorce, filing with insurance, dealing with unemployment, child support, whatever that is. There's just so much bureaucracy to that system. And as like the most type A person on earth who is like the project manager personality, I love to help people with that. Like I like to take things that have felt inaccessible and make them possible. So that's like, I don't know what that would even be, but it's just me thinking about things that I enjoy. And that's kind of what's always led me on my path anyway. It's just like following what lights me up.
So you're always thinking. You're just kind of always thinking ahead. And I think also what you're obviously good at. I mean, you're good at these things.
I think that what I have is a skill set for problem solving, and having a skill set that is so vague, generic, but it's so broadly applicable. It kind of has helped me feel like more confident in applying to things that I may not like be qualified for, but like I feel confident that I could do based on having done it in a different capacity.
So looking back at high school, what would you tell your high school self?
I would probably tell her to just keep doing what she's doing, just keep following the things that light her up, because, I remember being even younger than high school and I wanted to be a doctor, and I was reading medical terminology books. My mom was a vet tech. Like I was just like so excited about that. And then probably in middle school or high school, I watched her get a mole removed and I almost puked and fainted. And I was like,
I'm out.
And so it would have been very easy at that point to be like, oh my God, and now I don't know what to do with my whole life. But it was like, wow, look at this cool thing. They're going to send me stickers and tapes and I'm going to like hand them out. And then, it's just like I followed the things that lit me up and made me excited. And I didn't get too attached to the end outcome. And I think, especially as a person who's obviously a planner, I'm like a project manager, a planner, I don't make 5-year plans. I see absolutely no benefit to a 5-year plan. I'll make 1 year, monthly, quarterly goals like it's my job, but 5 years? Why would I want to crush the magic of what's possible by planning 5 years out?
I like that. Were you ever, you went to some really interesting places, politically charged, right? Just culturally very different. Were you afraid?
No.
Never afraid. Just
never afraid. I think learning the language was really helpful for that part. But also, I think coming from a place with a lot of preconceived notions about everyone, right? Like when you grow up in a small white community, obviously you can see some of their beliefs and values. And for me, like that just never resonated. Like I just wanted to just know things. And I knew that knowing things came from meeting people who are different than I was. So for me, it was always like a sense of curiosity. It just all goes back to curiosity, because when I was living abroad, like I had some uncomfortable experiences, but usually they didn't have actually anything to do with the people of the place I was in. But I think that I was just always really open to other people's perspectives. It's just like, again, in Egypt, my little notepad, like, why do they have a bruise on their forehead? Why do the taxi cab drivers have really long pinky nails? It was just like, my mind is just like, what does all this mean? And so, no, at no point did I ever feel scared. I always just felt grateful to be there, grateful to the people who supported me in being there, who showed me the way, who taught me about the place I was in.
What would you tell college students, people who are in college, figuring out what they want to do? Also, and I think you touched on this about the idea of student loans and having that, right? Maybe you would have made a different decision on a job because you didn't have that debt to pay off, right? That kind of restricts you in some ways. But what would you tell college students about what do they do after college? How do they find their place? How do they find that job that fits them?
Unless you want to do like a really specific thing, right? Like you want to be like a civil engineer or a neurosurgeon or something that where it's like, okay, you really need to kind of buckle down and focus and do that path because it's a long one. If you don't know, here's the other thing. It's like, it's never too late to do anything, right? But I think it's like, if you're at university and you take a class and that opens something for you, take another step further there. Because like, I know I took a class on like Russia and Islam in the former Soviet Union. That had nothing to do with business. It was obviously one of the elective courses, but it stirred something in my mind that I was more curious about. Did it also lead to me ultimately learning Arabic? I don't know, but it was like a part of it. Just like pulling at a thread, right? So if you find yourself finding something that you want to know more about or that you feel drawn to, like keep pulling at that thread, talk to your professor, ask him if he knows of an internship or if he knows anybody who works in a space or has jobs like that. Like you got to pull to your network and pull the thread, because every conversation you have will lead you to a new place. Every course you take, every new person you meet is leading you as you pull that thread, and you never know what you're going to find there. I remember taking an organizational behavior class, and that was a huge thread in ultimately ending up in intercultural relations, because the part of organizational behavior I found to be the most interesting was those cross-cultural examples. Like, you're just pulling at a thread, and like, you're going to find a little of it here, you're going to find a little of it there. The irony is, like, my operations class that I took in college, I had the worst grade that I ever got in my life. That's what I ended up doing. So it's not about like, is this the job that you're good at? Does this fit your degree? Is this going to pay well? It's like, does this open your curiosity? Does this pull you in? Does this make you want to know more? And if so, just keep pulling on it. And then you might discover once you get there, it leads to a completely different door. And don't be afraid to also pull that thread and go in that direction. Because I think about all the people that I know from college, and I don't know a single one, maybe there's a few, if I really dug deep, that are doing what they studied in college.
Yeah.
And I have this same conversation. My sister-in-law is 14 years old, and she lives in Turkey, and they have to take this huge test in middle school that determines their whole future. And I'm just like, she's so stressed. I'm like, you're 14 years old.
Right.
Do you have any idea how many times you're going to change your mind? Like, it doesn't matter. Do the thing that makes you feel the best.
Right. No, I think that's my 13-year-old always says, why are you asking me what I want to do? I haven't lived yet.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. You have had an incredible life. You have lived more and done more than most people will ever do. And you're young still.
Thank you. I hope there's much more to be done.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. I want to talk to you again in 25 years and see what else you've added on. Thank you. Thanks for sharing all of that. I think a lot of people will be inspired by your story.
Thank you for having me here. As a first-generation college student, I think having voices and hearing voices of people who started where I started was really, really helpful, because I think sometimes, even when you're thinking about what college degrees exist, like I know as a first generation college student, it was like law, business,
Right.
medicine, like you can't even begin to comprehend the things that exist out there. So, do those informational interviews, ask people. People love to talk about themselves, ask people questions, because you never know what you're going to find.
Yeah. And you don't know what you don't know. So
Exactly.
well, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And I look forward to continuing to listen to your episodes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Path Found. If anything we talked about today connected with you or gave you a new perspective, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared the episode with someone you care about. You can also find us on Instagram at Path Found Podcast. To explore more stories, resources, and ways to get involved, visit KeystoneNetwork.org. This podcast is just one part of the journey. At Keystone Network, we're helping young people and anyone figuring it out as they go build meaningful futures one step at a time. A huge thank you to my podcast editor, David Strutt. You can find him on LinkedIn for helping bring these stories to life, and to Elizabeth Miner at Silvermine Creative for the beautiful artwork and web design. And if you're on your own path, navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out as you go, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next time on Path Found.